Welcome to Tuesday's edition of COVID-19. Authorities have recorded more than 300 cases today here in Korea. Accordingly, level 2 social distancing has been imposed in the Greater Seoul area, while officials here in the capital city have also launched a separate campaign to discourage unnecessary outings until the end of the year. For more on this campaign and the pandemic numbers, I turn now to our Kwon for more. So I do start off with the daily tally here in Korea.
Sunny, we have almost 80 more infections compared to yesterday, meaning we are back in the 300s. 349 cases were confirmed on Monday, 24 on Tuesday, that is. 24,000 tests were conducted on Monday with a positivity rate of 1.44%, and 320 were domestic infections with 29 imported cases, which means a rise in both of these. And that brings the total here in the country to 31,353, the death toll at 510, and also the number of people in quarantine or under treatment has surpassed 4,000. Now, if we turn to our graph now, we see quite a jump on the week. 230 is what we saw last Tuesday. Now we are at 349. The cases are mostly in the 300s, dropped to 271 yesterday, but that was attributed to a lower number of cases, or rather tests conducted over the weekend. And if we take a look at our map now, many of those cases concentrated in the metropolitan region, but 16 out of 17 major provinces or cities in the country have been affected this Tuesday. 133 in Seoul, 81 in Gyeonggi-do province, and also 46 in Gangwon-do province. Here, many cases linked to a cluster related to the military, which Kim Ji-yeon is going to go into the details in a bit.
Right, so and as I mentioned at the start of the program, Seoul has launched a separate campaign to better contain the latest outbreak.
Right, Sunny. First off, Seoul, Gyeonggi-do province, and Incheon have been put under level 2 social distancing measures. Gatherings of more than 100 people are banned. No dining after 9 p.m., only takeout at coffee shops. We talked a lot about these social distancing measures at level 2 before, but on Monday, as Sunny just mentioned, the Seoul metropolitan government took a step further, declaring what it calls an emergency pause period for 10 million citizens. And this will be in effect until the year end, with an aim to reduce movement in the city as much as possible.
We decided to take preemptive measures equivalent to level 3 social distancing in consideration of the high risk of chain transmissions stemming from Seoul's high population density and the large number of people moving into and out of the city.
Public transportation will be reduced during nighttime to encourage people to go home early and refrain from socializing, especially with year-end gatherings coming up. Beginning Tuesday, city buses will operate at 20% less intervals past 10 p.m., and the same goes for subways beginning Friday. Also, rallies of more than 10 people are banned, and stricter and more detailed than level 2 social distancing rules will be implemented at 10 facilities. Now, social distancing is also being tightened around the globe with 59.5 million cases. If we do have a rise at this level, tomorrow you might even see 60 million cases. Let's take a look at the hotspots around the world. These 10 countries here make up 40 million of total cases, and that includes the US, Russia, and Italy on our next table now, which have really high figures on a daily basis, over 188,000 in the U.S. in the past 24 hours alone. And those are the figures I have for now. I'll be back with more updates after the government briefing. Back to you, Sunny.
Right, so I'll see you later. Right, let's turn back to local infections now. One recent cluster involves that at a military base, and I have our defense correspondent Kim Ji-yeon here in the studio with more on that. Welcome, Ji-yeon.
Hello.
Right, Ji-yeon, to start us off with the latest outbreak at the base.
Sure. Seoul's Defense Ministry reported a total of 33 new COVID-19 cases in the military this week. The majority of the new infections occurred at a military unit in Cheolwon, which is about a 2-hour drive from the capital and is located near the front lines at the inter-Korean border. The new infections from the unit were confirmed through massive testings of around 600 service members, which were conducted after the first index case was reported. The full test results are yet to be released, so additional cases could be reported in the coming days. The epidemiological links of the recent infections are still unclear. But since the unit is next to Pocheon, where a dozen infections were reported following a cluster infection in late July, there are speculations that infections there may have spread to the nearby unit in Cheolwon. Since the start of the outbreak, the military has seen a total of 263 cases, of which 175 have recovered and 88 are still in treatment. 1,710 service members are in isolation in accordance to the health authorities' guidelines, and 2,419 others have also been put into quarantine as part of the military's tougher guidance.
Right, Sean. And you were telling me before the start of the program that new restrictions that is, have been put into place to better tackle this latest outbreak.
Yes, as of Tuesday, which is today, the military has ordered all senior military personnel nationwide to refrain from gatherings after work and during weekends, and to stay home during off-duty hours unless they're going to a hospital or getting food and other essential supplies. And this is equivalent to level 2 social distancing guidelines. The move comes amid criticisms that a high number of infections in the military stem from senior personnel who are given more leeway to engage in social gatherings. This is in contrast to service members of lower rank and cadets who must follow strict guidelines and have been impacted the most by cancellations and leave and off-base activities following infections.
Infections among soldiers returning from leave have been confirmed at 4 to date, which account for only 6% of the total cases in the military. We're enhancing our measures due to the fact that most of the cases comprise of senior personnel or public officials.
Regardless, in regions where level 2 social distancing is in effect, such as the Seoul metropolitan area, service members are under the new level 2 social distancing measures, which means they are prohibited from taking vacations starting today for the next 2 weeks. One-day trips to safe regions where there have been no confirmed COVID-19 cases in a week will be allowed, but only if permission is granted by a commanding officer.
I see. And I also hear U.S. Forces Korea has released a statement on new infections among American service members stationed here in the country.
Right. In a statement released Monday, it confirmed 22 USFK-affiliated individuals have tested positive for the coronavirus after arriving in Korea between November 5th and November 20th. A total of 11 service members and their dependents arrived at Osan Air Base on U.S. government-chartered flights earlier this month, and the rest have arrived on international commercial flights at Incheon Airport. All of the incoming service members and affiliated individuals who have tested positive have been transferred to an isolation facility at U.S. Army Garrison Humphreys in Pyeongtaek and Osan Air Base. There's little risk of a cluster infection emerging from these new cases since they've been engaged in limited contact after arrival. But since the outbreak, the USFK has reported 368 cases so far. And despite the recent surge in new infections, the USFK says it continues to maintain a robust combined defense posture to protect South Korea against any threat or adversary while maintaining prudent preventative measures against the coronavirus.
Right, well, that's good to know. All right, Cheon, thank you for that coverage. I hope to see you again soon.
Me too.
Right, it's time now for the regular briefing on COVID-19 here in Korea for this Tuesday. Social distancing here in the metropolitan region stands at level 2 starting today for the next 2 weeks. Now, having said that, up on the screen now are the new guidelines. Under level 2, gatherings of more than 100 people are banned. And here in Seoul, as Kwon-soo mentioned earlier, the cap on crowds at rallies stands at 10. Also, 1/3 of all public servants and workers at public entities are working from home starting today. Private firms are also being advised to do the same. But if this is not possible, they are being asked to ensure safe distancing among workers within the office. Civil servants have also been asked to refrain from social gatherings, and should they choose to ignore this advice and then be infected with COVID-19, they will reportedly face consequences. Sports events are limiting their audience capacity to 10%. Regular religious sermons face a 20% attendance ceiling, while small gatherings for choir practice, Bible study and meal sharing are banned. In the academic arena, kindergartens, primary and middle schools face a 1/3 attendance limit, but at high schools, the ceiling is at 2/3. High-risk facilities, including clubs and bars, have suspended their operations, while restaurants are allowed to accommodate in-house diners until 9 in the evening, and after that, they can only offer takeout and delivery services. The briefing is about to start. We'll come back to you afterwards.
Let us now begin our regular briefing on the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea for November 24th, Tuesday. As of today midnight, we have 320 new local infections, and the total caseload now stands at 31,353. And newly, we have 183 more people making full recovery, while 4,121 people still remain in quarantine. And there are 79 patients with severe or critical conditions. We had one additional fatality. I extend my deepest condolences to the deceased and the members of the bereaved family. First of all, today, as of November 24th, we have some updates on the domestic infections by region as of noon today. And please note that the numbers are subject to change. First, in the metropolitan area in Seoul's Seocho-gu district Sana, in relation to the Sana, we had the first index case being identified on the 18th, and we also have 22 additional cases. We have 23 total cases to date. And in relation to an high school in Seoul's Dongdaemun-gu district and church in Mapo-gu district, we have 23 additional cases, raising the total to 99. And in Noryangjin, we have the teaching faculty exam cram school. In relation to this place, we have 7 additional cases, raising the total to 88 to date. And in relation to an online gathering, we also have had an unclassified confirmed cases in relation to a singing room, and we have reclassified the cases, and we have 19 more cases being confirmed. The total now stands at 39. At a different Sana in Seoul Seocho-gu district, we also have identified that 6 more cases have been confirmed, and a total of 62 have been confirmed to date. And in the city of Incheon, in relation to Yeonsu-gu district of entertainment, a nightlife entertainment facility, we have a total of 27 confirmed cases to date. And in relation to a Namdong-gu district friends and family gathering, we have 6 additional cases, raising the total to 63. And in relation to a kids cafe in Gyeonggi-do province, Yongin City, we have 19 additional cases, raising the total to 73. And next, in the non-metropolitan area, in the Chungnam in Gongju City, in relation to a Purume nursing hospital, we have the first index case being identified on the 23rd. We also have 14 additional cases. 15 cases have been confirmed to date. And also in relation to a music academy in Busan, we also have additional cases, and a total of 24 people have been confirmed to date. And we take this opportunity to say that on the 21st of November, we have had a competition of the Jangul musical instrument. And if you were at this competition, we ask you to get tested as soon as possible. And last but not least, in the Gangwon-do province, in relation to Cheolwon-gun County Military Unit, we have 3 additional cases, and a total of 44 people have been confirmed to date. And next, we have some updates on our R&D regarding the treatment as well as vaccines. First of all, in South Korea, we have the antibody clinical trial testings that are carried out. And we have carried out the second clinical trial participated by 17 clinics. And we have a target of 300 participants, and so far we have 292 patients that have been applied. And we also have 31 patients that have been exceeding our threshold, and we believe that the 300 could be reached together, as these data are from yesterday. And in relation to the clinical trials, we would like to also extend our deepest gratitude to all of the patients for your participation, as well as the medical staff who are also exerting their full efforts in the research, as well as the as related companies and firms that are carrying out increased research as well. And we have the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety that has confirmed yesterday. But as for the vaccines, DNA, we have been approving this in June. And we also have another related vaccine that has been approved yesterday. So we have 2 domestic vaccines that have also been heading into the clinical trial stage. We believe that all of these 3 vaccine candidates that are developed here in South Korea could also embark on its clinical trial by year end. And in relation to the blood plasma treatment, we have the second phase clinical trial carried out, and we have had 16 patients that have been administered at about 12 clinics nationwide. We also like to thank you for your participation, as well as related clinics and the research centers and the firms as well. In addition, we have also said that starting from the 16th of November, we have had a group donation of the blood samples and in Daegu City, and this is a 3-week-long donation. And in relation to this, we also like to once again extend our deepest gratitude to the members of Shincheonji, and also we would like to also thank the Daegu City and the Korean Red Cross for providing your support as well. And up until now, we have about 4,300 people who have expressed their intentions to donate their blood, and we have over 2,800 people who have actually donated their blood samples. And in terms of remdesivir, we have administered the drug to a total of 877 patients across Korea. And in relation to the cluster infections, we have some analyzation of the trends. And compared to the 2 weeks before, and maybe a month ago, and compared to the end of October to the current stage, currently we are at the 46th week, which is 2 weeks ago from today. And we have had about 41 cluster infections. And compared to the late October, we have seen that this number has doubled nearly. And what's more worrisome is that these cluster infections and the venues of cluster infections have accounted for, a majority of them have been accounted for, to centering around the family and friends from 4 to 16. And we also had 1 related to multi-use facilities, while we had 10 cluster infections related to multi-use facilities right now. And in relation to this, we see that if there are high physical contacts, and also higher chances of not wearing face masks, we are seeing increase of cluster infections. So once again, we highlight to refrain from going to non-essential gatherings and events, and we also highlight the importance of strict compliance to the quarantine measures. And at the same time, we also have continued cluster infections centering around hospitals and nursing hospitals. So we ask for your particular precautions as well. We also will exert our full efforts to this end. And in relation to this, we have the Safety E-Report, which is run by the Safety Ministry, and we have had many reports on the failure to wear face masks. And there were a number of private academies where people did not wear face masks. In particular, it was related to a PE sports hospital, and they did not wear face masks. And also at another cram school, we also had some reports that the students did not wear their masks properly. And also there were design academy schools and computer academies where people did not screen the body temperature of their students, and people did not wear face masks as well. And we have seen that at a Taekwondo academy, which is attended by many children, they also shared food and also shared utensils like cups when they were drinking water. And to this end, the quarantine authorities would like to note that starting from the midnight of today until until the next 2 weeks. We have the level 2 social distancing put in place in the Seoul metropolitan area and also 1.5 level in the Honam region. And once again, we would like to highlight under the leadership of the Prime Minister, we would like to carry out stringent quarantine measures. And starting from the 23rd, we also have carried out intensive work from home scheme and flexible work hours for all of the public sector, including public institutions and government ministries as well. We also are having stricter restrictions as well, and the guidelines are equivalent to the level 2 social distancing measures. At the same time, the private sectors, we will also cancel or delay any non-essential gatherings, and if a gathering is needed, we will switch to non-face-to-face means, and if also we have to inevitably meet together physically, we would refrain from having group meals. And we will always wear face masks at all times and comply with stringent distancing measures as well. Moreover, the social distancing intensified measure is carrying out, and it is a very critical moment where all of the public needs to muster their strength as well, and we thereby want to once again highlight the stringent compliance to the quarantine measures, including face mask wearing, as well as the distancing and washing of their hands. And please note that if you do not wear face masks, you would also have more exposure to the virus, and please refrain from having any gatherings and events, and even during your daily routines, you are exposed to the COVID-19, and also please refrain from going to gatherings that are non-essential and stay home as much as possible. Last but not least, I would also like to note that COVID-19 is striking not only South Korea but also the entire international community. Against this backdrop, South Korea is also standing at the critical point facing another crisis. However, we shall overcome this, and we have great confidence that we can overcome such a crisis. What's critical right now is that in our daily routines, we need to also delay and postpone having gatherings with our acquaintances and friends, and this is very critical at this moment. And as mentioned before, if you do not wear a face mask, it is very dangerous, and you would also have more exposure to the virus. It is a great pity for me to have to say this, but we also, in order to curb the further spread of the virus, we shall prevent ourselves from having other gatherings until the year end, and we also ask you to refrain and cancel any gatherings that also were planned. And also when you are dining and when you are enjoying public saunas, unless you cannot wear a face mask, please refrain from having dialogue. Already many experts have noted and pointed out the following. If we have a higher boundary of activities, and also as for the young generation, which also has a higher boundary of activities, they need to take particular precautions, and also these people are also very important to carry out quarantine measures as well. And recently we have seen cluster infections stemming from universities. And when you are young, and for the younger generations, we want to highlight that there should be no more gatherings and meetings during the rest of the 2020, and switch your meetings to non-face-to-face meetings. This is the only way for us to safeguard the lives of our vulnerable class, and to also have a safe winter that we do not have a vaccine as of yet. And it is a very desperate moment right now, and by doing so, we believe that this can only ensure a safe environment for the students, for the test takers, especially with the college entrance exam coming up. And this will be the last winter without a COVID-19 vaccine. And we believe that starting from this year even, there could be some countries that could start inoculation of their public. And we believe that these vaccines need to be inoculated twice in the interval of 1 month. And with the cold chain scheme, we would also adapt to the securing of the vaccines more flexibly as well and swiftly. And currently, South Korea, in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine, we will have no delay in securing the vaccines, and we will also go hand in hand with the plans that have been set up already, and we are also carrying out related negotiations. So please do not have concerns or do not feel nervous about securing of the vaccines. In South Korea, comparatively to other countries, we have a relatively low number of total tally in terms of COVID-19 patients, and the quarantine measures are also being put in place to a large extent, and we are also taking delicate measures, and we believe that the results and the process will be revealed very transparently. And as for the vaccine candidates, the 3 types of candidates that have been developed here in South Korea, we have 2 of them which has commenced the clinical trial. And as for the antibody treatment, we believe that the second trial, the testings analysis and the patient's application will be ended by today, and we believe that there are great journeys ahead, many procedures. However, please note that many people are exerting their full efforts, and probably when we have another novel virus in the future, we believe that we will have the technology to develop our homegrown vaccines to protect the lives of our public. And thanks to the researchers as well as the government's measures and the public's participation and the medical staff's devotion, we believe that we can have a safe winter as well. And please note that during the rest of this year, please do not make non-essential gatherings aside from your family members. Thank you very much.
Right, that was Kwon Junuk, Deputy Director General of the Central Disease Control Headquarters, with Tuesday's afternoon briefing. So to give us the summary.
Well, Kwon mentioned how there has been a shift in cluster infection trends in recent weeks. Compared to a month ago, there's been much more numbers of cases linked to family or friends gatherings, as well as a rise in cases linked to multi-use facilities. And this is also probably why we are seeing these new cases, for instance, in the capital Seoul, linked to a high school and a church, a total of 99 cases related to that case, and also 88 cases linked to a cram school. So you can see that how one cluster can have as much as nearly 100 cases. And also in Yongin and Gyeonggi-do province, there are 73 cases linked to a kids cafe, and in Gangwon-do province's Cheoron, 3 more cases related to a military unit, which Kim Ji-yeon talked about before. So that brings the total to 44 there. So Kwon mentioned that social distancing really has to be abided by, and he also in particular urged the younger generation to cancel any year-end gatherings until the end of this year and try to turn to non-contact meetings. Meanwhile, there's also been some positive development related to a vaccine development progress here in the country. 3 domestic vaccine candidates are maybe to begin their phase 3 trial this year.
I see. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. All right, so thank you for that coverage.
See you tomorrow.
Right, in other news, history was made in the 2020 U.S. House elections with a record number of female and minority candidates being voted into Congress, including 4 Korean Americans. Now, their journey to Capitol Hill was chronicled by Joseph Chun, a documentary filmmaker who now joins us live from New York to share his story. Welcome, Joseph.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Right, Joseph, now the 2020 elections were some of the most closely contested races in recent memory. How is the Korean American community responding to these remarkable results?
Sure, it was very historic by many measures. We had a pandemic, we had a social unrest caused by racism, systemic racism, and death of George Floyd, and on top of that, we had an economic crisis. So in terms of the Korean American context, as you alluded to, 5 Korean Americans ran in the general election, which I think is the most in history, and 4 of them ended up winning. Even the one who lost, he ran, and he truly showed the inspiring underdog grit and spirit, almost unseating the incumbent. So a lot of Korean Americans are stoked about the results, and there's high hopes as to how the presence of Korean American politicians in the U.S. House would, going forward, affect the Korean American community as well as with our relationship to the Korean Peninsula.
Joseph, what inspired you to make this documentary?
Well, I've always been interested in this notion of Korean diaspora, what the relationship should be between those who live on the homeland and those who are outside of the homeland. And prior to my current project, I made a film titled Jeronimo, which is about Koreans living in Cuba. After this film was made, I was often questioned by the audiences and others that I encounter, asking, "Hey, so Joseph, what do you think the members of Korean diaspora can actually do for the motherland?" And once this question, this curiosity was planted in I guess in me, I started to question the role of members of Korean diaspora and whether Korean American politicians to be can actually make an impact on the larger peninsula. For instance, being a member of the world's arguably most powerful country, the United States, whether they can help bring peace to their motherland, Korea, just as how Americans of Jewish ancestry play a huge role in bringing peace to Israel, arguable peace to Israel. So that was my initial hypothesis. Can Korean American politicians to be have a role to play for the Korean Peninsula? But over time, as I started filming, the concept changed a bit because it became much more intimate and personal. Their interest on why they wanted to run for public office. And so rather than dealing with these characters from this macro abstract level of diasporic role, I started becoming more interested in their diversity, their personal identity formation, what their role is within the Korean American community, and how to coexist amid our political, ideological, religious differences.
Right. Joseph, the pandemic appears to be widening the political rift over in the U.S. What is the stance of the Korean American community and the candidates representing them on the issue of COVID-19?
It varies. Certainly I cannot speak for all Korean Americans. I just know from my own limited encounter with many Koreans or non-Koreans how many of these politicians or Korean American communities are dealing with this situation. I would say that generally Korean Americans are very compliant with the government orders to wear a mask, keep social distance, and so forth. But I would also say that for those who tend to be more, for instance, conservative leaning, politically speaking, can tend to, advocate for their personal liberty and would like businesses to open rather than closing down, because they think, not necessarily because they don't think COVID is not as a serious issue, but because they believe ideologically the personal liberty issue is much more important than handling the COVID crisis.
Right. Joseph, I understand you practiced law in New York before embarking on your career as a filmmaker. What is next in your journey?
Well, so I just spent the past 3.5 months shooting these candidates, recording their historic journey to winning the general election to be the first U.S. Congress member, Congresswoman. So my next step would be to obviously construct a compelling personal and collective narrative of these characters. And, on a more macro level, I would like to continue to tell the stories of the Korean diasporic tales, which I think is important for people in the homeland to also know.
Right. All right, Joseph, good luck in your future projects. And thank you for making the time to join us live at this hour.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
한국은 백신의 공평한 접근권을 보장하기 위한 세계보건기구의 노력에 적극 참여하고 코박스에도 동참하고 있습니다.
Right, a flurry of diplomatic agendas took place this past weekend, with leaders worldwide placing priority on the pandemic and promoting peace and prosperity. For more on the G20 and APEC summits, virtual summits that is, I have Professor Im Jung from Koongju National University. Pleasure to have you back, Professor Im.
Thank you.
And I also have Professor Mason Ritchie from Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. Hello again, Professor Ritchie.
Hi, always happy to be here.
Right, Professor Im, what is your assessment of the latest series of virtual exchanges among global leaders under the frameworks of G20 and the APEC?
Right, APEC and the G20, these two are actually two of the largest multilateral frameworks. So these two used to get lots of global attention, as you remember. For example, in 2005, here in Korea, we hosted the APEC in Busan, or in 2010, we hosted the G20 in Seoul, which were very probably memorable moments, not only just for the South Korean people, but also for probably other people who were attracted by the beautiful venue or our hospitality. So these kind of things, even though I do appreciate Malaysia's leadership, chairmanship, and the Saudi Arabia's good, again, the chairmanship, but still we miss that kind of, diplomatic, protocol-oriented gestures or manners, these things. So we miss that a lot. This is number one point. And the number 2 point is, again, we didn't have enough opportunity to see a kind of coincidental bilateral meetings or, greetings between the leaders, all the things, this time we couldn't see those. So we probably missed these kind of things for this time. But still, UN also hosted a virtual meeting for this specific year. So probably all this virtual seminar, virtual meetings became already a kind of, again, the new normal for everyone, which does have probably other positive implications for the future too. Mm-hmm.
Right. Professor Ritchie, within a time frame of 2 weeks, global leaders met for virtual talks for the ASEAN, the APEC and the G20 talks, with the common theme, of course, being the pandemic. Do tell us a bit about the accords reached following these discussions.
Yeah, so in the first place, these meetings are always aspirational. The leaders want to, usually at least, put up a solid, relatively united front. They want to have usually something positive to say, not only generally, but particularly things that they can take back to their domestic constituencies and try to sell at home as leadership or as somehow bringing advantages, obviously, to their own countries. So any accords and any statements made in the joint communiques are of course aspirational, and they still have to be cashed out in concrete action. And so we'll have to see what happens with that. But of course, in general, especially given what we've seen over the last year, there was quite a bit of attention paid in one form or another in all three of these summits to sort of placing of attention on multilateral cooperation. Notably in terms of obviously virus cooperation, but also the stability of international financial markets, attempts to try to shore up the multilateral trade regime, which has been a little bit under threat, I think, this last year in terms of, or maybe even for a few years before that, with some protectionism. Also protecting supply chains, which has of course been difficult in the pandemic. And then the two sort of major things that came out of it, I think, were in the first place, obviously a call, particularly in the G20, to assist developing countries with access to potential COVID-19 vaccines, and also official debt relief again, for developing countries, which is important for not only their own financial stability, but also for them to have the financial resources to be able to acquire some of those vaccines.
Right. And speaking of the joint statements, Professor Im, I understand a proposal made by President Moon Jae-in about facilitating essential cross-border travel, even amid the pandemic, was adopted into these statements, both at the APEC and the G20 summits, respectively. Please tell us more about this.
Yeah. Well, South Korea's relative success, I only say just relative because we also have a hard time here and the number is increasing, which is very unfortunate for everyone. But still, relatively speaking, pretty much our situation is still under control. And every country actually under this kind of situation, every state has a kind of dilemma. Economic activity containing the spread of the virus. These two, it's not exactly a kind of trade-off relationship, but we have this kind of trade-off-like situations in almost every country. So having said that, here in South Korea, we are kind of maintaining still trying to maintain a balance between the two, which is relatively speaking again successful. So that approach can be probably applied for other countries as well. And the South Korea's that again, especially President Moon Jae-in's that remark has been again adopted in the statement. That is I think is a good thing, of course, for South Korea because we took a kind of initiative in agenda setting, I think. So in agenda setting, we showed a good case and we took an initiative. This can, I think, contribute to the future leadership of South Korea in a multilateral arena or multilateral framework. Mm-hmm.
Professor Ritchie, US President Donald Trump made an appearance at both these virtual summits. With regard to the APEC summit, I believe he hasn't attended one since 2017. What do you suppose drove him to join the latest talks?
That's correct. Trump has a very spotty record of attending these large multilateral events, and indeed 2017 was the last time that he was at APEC. Why he chose to attend this time is an open question. He's a bit of a mercurial president. And it could be that he told himself or his advisors told him that this is the last hurrah, so he might as well go before he's out of office in January of 2021. This might have been an attempt to cement, or at least in his mind, to cement his America First legacy by underlining those themes, which probably from his perspective has the side benefit of sort of poisoning the well one last time before Biden comes in on some things that Biden would like to do, which are very different than what Trump imagines is important. I can also imagine that, frankly, he doesn't have a whole lot to do right now other than tweet. He's a lame duck president, and most presidents and their cabinet members, when they're in a lame duck period, can mostly focus only on the things that are really directly, closely linked to their constitutional role. And in that case, foreign policy is one of the only things that the president can do unilaterally. We do know that although his address at APEC was closed to the media, that he did sign off on the free trade support in the joint statement from APEC. At the G20, I would say he was a bit less positive. He railed against the Paris Climate Change Agreement. He, instead of supporting that, which is expected, touted and promoted U.S. oil and gas production, which is radically out of step with what I think most of the rest of the world is looking for. And then, of course, he tweeted, off and on about, the fever dream of, widespread election fraud. And then, to sort of make matters worse, left the pandemic preparedness meeting to go golfing. So, all in all, this was exactly a reminder of why it is that the U.S. people voted him out of office in November.
Right. Professor, if you mentioned Korea's relative success in its strategy against the pandemic, but our relative effective strategy was shared at these global platforms. Do you believe our comparative success in keeping the pandemic under relative control has perhaps offered us a stronger voice in the diplomatic arena?
Well, It is, of course, very difficult to apply South Korea's that kind of, how would you say, matter, because our relative success is because of many different things. Of course, number one is leadership, and then institutionalize the process, or most importantly, perhaps civic culture. Our Korean citizens, all this mature civic culture contributed a lot. So applying all the things samely in other probably regions or countries or states, because they do have their own different situations. It might be that easy to apply all the things in other regions, but still, I think we can't, we can manualize, probably we can manualize our success or our measures, what kind of things we did, for example, certain period of time, and after that, with what we did. So that kind of thing is probably necessary, and with those, actual manuals, I think we can speak more actively to the countries who really need the helps or that kind of, lessons from other countries. Mm-hmm.
Professor Richard, speaking very briefly, given Korea's current relative success with COVID-19, what do you suppose can it do to further perhaps strengthen its diplomatic clout in the international arena?
I think the first thing is, it can use its success to underline the importance of multilateral cooperation and sharing of best practices and underlining how a liberal rules-based order with cooperative governments we're working on global problems is necessary because those problems are global. They can't be solved individually. And so the practices that Korea has are ones that they partially borrowed from seeing other places. They're partially built on the success of other places as well in other countries in the world. And I think underlining that fact is, I think, one of the most important things.
Right. All right, Professor Richard, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Professor Im, as always, thank you for being with us today. Right, and on that note, we end this edition of COVID-19. As mentioned earlier, level 2 social distancing is in effect from today for those in the metropolitan region. So do seek to abide by the enhanced safety measures to ensure an effective containment of the latest outbreak. Thank you for watching.